Hey everyone, my name is Teela, and if we haven't met before, I'm a graphic designer and digital artist sharing a free design, lettering, or illustration tutorial every single Tuesday over on my website and YouTube channel. I specialize in floral and botanical illustrations in Procreate, so today we're going to have a bunch of fun by painting some freestyle gouache florals directly in Procreate. In this workshop, we'll talk about tricks on creating a basic composition, how to create a preliminary sketch of your primary elements, and decisions I make about when to add detail and when to simplify. We'll take advantage of multiple layers and groups, along with adding variety to our foliage elements to create extra volume while also avoiding visual clutter. This is a beginner-friendly tutorial, but if you feel lost at any point in time, or if you're new to Procreate and just want to get the basics down, I also offer a free Procreate for Beginners course over on my site, and I'll leave a link to that on screen. This tutorial was recorded using a 5th gen iPad Pro. It's 12.9 inches and 256 gigs. I love that larger size. It does feel like just drawing on a sheet of paper, and the 256 gigs. So I've been using my iPad for about 5 years with daily Procreate usage. And in that time, I've only used a little more than half of my storage. So if you're trying to decide on storage for a new iPad, hopefully that'll help you get a little bit of an idea of how much Procreate files will take up space on your iPad. You don't need to use an iPad Pro, just any iPad that supports pressure sensitivity. So any of the ones you see on screen will work and are what I recommend. I'm using a 2nd gen Apple Pencil with my iPad. I always recommend against using third-party styluses because they're just never as reliable. I'm often asked during webinars or workshops which accessories I use, so I want to mention those really quick in case you're in the market or you just want a second opinion. So I do use a screen protector. I use the Paper-Like screen protector, and there are a ton of ripoffs. So if that's the one you choose to go with, just make sure you're purchasing it from the official Paper-Like website. I've heard from past students that the ripoff brands wear down the nib of your Apple Pencil, but I've been using my Paper-Like for over 2 years now, and my nib looks like the day that I got it. So highly recommend Paper-Like. If you decide to get a ripoff of Paper-Like, you might want to pick up some extra nibs. If you've caught any of my webinars, workshops, tutorials, or courses over the last year, I'm sure you've noticed I use a grip on my Apple Pencil. And this little grip is called the Nimble Grip. It's 100% silicone, so it's nice and soft. It's got a little bit of squish to it, and it's easy to take on and off. So speaking of which, you will need to take it off to charge it, but it's super easy to do. There is a little bit of tension to it because it has to stay in place on your Apple Pencil, but you just take it off, magnetize it to the side of your iPad. When it's done charging, you put it back on. So in my mind, it's a small inconvenience for a massive benefit, and it's become such a part of my process now, I don't even think about it. So you can see it just slides right back on, and I'm ready to go. And I'm one of those people, I just naturally write with a death grip, so it doesn't matter what stylus I'm using. I hold my styluses like uncommonly tight. So when I write for really long periods of time, I have like a sore on the inside of my finger, and it can get numb, and it's really painful. So once I started using this, it totally went away. I can write for long periods of time. I'm not in pain afterwards, so I use it every single time that I break out my iPad, and it comes in different colors too, so even better. All right, now that we have all the tech out of the way, let's talk about the brushes we're going to be using. Pick up that free color palette, and we can start painting. For this workshop, we'll be using my Gouache Lovers Procreate brush set, but you can really use any brushes that you'd like. I like to have a bit of texture variation in my piece, so the exact brushes we'll be using from that set are the sketching pencil brush, which is perfect for planning out our layout. It also has a really nice graphite texture to it. We'll also be using the dried out texture brushes. This is one of my favorite brushes because it has this really pretty randomized texture to it. And then the liner brush we'll use for all of our are more linear details. You can also stipple with it if you'd like. So I like using this for tiny dots and long lines. Finally, we'll be using the thick round opaque brush. This brush is a solid brush, but it does have this really subtle paint texture within it. So whenever you're drawing blocks of colors like petals or leaves, you'll notice just a slight texture within them. And then the edges of the brush also have just a little bit of paint texture as well. The color palette is available as a free download. I've listed that download link on screen, and it's also available in my resource library if you're a free Every Tuesday email subscriber. That's located at tuesdaytribe.com. I'm going to start by creating a brand new canvas that's 1500 pixels by 1500 pixels at 300 dpi. I work in the display P3 color profile, but if you're on an older iPad and don't have access to that, then the default sRGB color profile is perfectly fine. Okay, we've got our brand new canvas, and the first thing I'm going to do is set a background color. So I'm going to select the first color in the bottom row. And before we get started with drawing everything out, we first need to plan out our layout. And in order to plan out our layout, I like utilizing a flower composition trick. I use this very frequently whenever I'm putting a big bouquet like this together. And all you have to do is reference some past flower bouquets. So a really useful way to find those is on Pinterest. I have a flower reference photos board. I'll leave a link on screen to this photos board. And I just scroll through and I find bouquets that are really appealing to me or have the variety that I'd like. And then I grab a photo, I draw right on top of it the florals that are similar, and then I turn off that original photo, and then I've got my layout. So here's another example of one type of floral right here with the sunflowers. I draw those on top of it, turn off that photo, and now I know where to lay out my own flowers. Here's another example of that. I want to give you a few of these so you have a good idea. So this is another one of those layouts that's using the same flower. I turn off the background layer, and then I've got my layout where I'm going to position those flowers. Here's some forget-me-nots. So I like that this changes in scale as it goes upward. It gives us some really nice asymmetry. So there is our layout. Now, when you get to a very large bouquet like this, you could either just grab the certain florals that you would like to grab and draw on top of them, just like this, and then you can have those ones positioned where you'd like, or you can take it one step further and start drawing in all the different types of flowers in here. And I usually do this by notating them a little bit differently. That way I know when I'm drawing my own florals, I need to change up the style of that floral or the type of floral. You can even expand it to foliage. So when you turn off that background photo, now you've got your layout and you're ready to go. So it's a really handy trick. You can be as strict with it or as loose with it as you would like, but it helps with planning a lot when you're just getting started. So I'd recommend doing this exercise a little bit, and then you can just start planning out your own. It'll be like second nature to you once you do it a few times. So heading back into Procreate, we're going to plan out our own large florals now. So I'm grabbing black and I'm heading up and grabbing my sketching pencil brush, and we're going to plan out where our largest florals are going to be positioned. And I usually like positioning these in an asymmetrical layout. I don't like things being too matchy-matchy on both sides or top and bottom. So when I'm starting to draw them out, I position them in all different places. I also make sure to change up the scale. That way it seems more organic, because in nature, you're not going to see everything be exactly the same size all the time. So this helps me to get a more realistic layout. And then once I have that template, I center it on screen. I just get a basic centering on my canvas, and right here I'm just cleaning up some of these circles because we're going to start drawing within them to plan out the position of our floral. So I'm doing kind of a made-up floral here, and right now I'm going to sketch in where the stamens are going to go, and these stamens, some of them are going to be right in the center. So these circles dictate how large the floral is going to be, and now these little circles are dictating where the stamen is. So on some of them it's going to be lower in the circle, higher in the circle, to the side of the circle, so they're facing different directions as well. And this will help us to plot out and scale our petals appropriately for the direction that our florals are facing. So after that, I rough in 5 lines for the petals, and you can make your petals any shape that you would like. My petals are more of a diamond shape, but please feel free. This is a made-up flower, so you can do whatever you want here. But I am making sure that I am painting 5 petals on each one of these florals. So you can see, depending on where the position of the stamen is, that's going to dictate how large each petal is. And these lines are a really nice guideline to show me how far I need to extend these petals each time. So you can go through and you can draw out all the lines and then draw out all the petals on top of the lines, or you can just draw out the lines, or you can just have your circle, your two circles, and then paint everything in. It's totally up to you how much guidance you want in a template layer as you paint on top of it. If freehanding all of the different parts of your flower feels a little bit overwhelming, I want to show you how you can use a source image to practice or to influence your own decision making when it comes to putting those petals in. So I'm going to use the forget-me-nots image that we talked about earlier as the example here. So we'll just do exactly what we talked about before. We'll draw those circles around them, and then we'll put in the stamens. And when we put those stamens in, this is what it looks like without the photo there. So that'll give you a little bit of an idea about the shape of the stamen and the positioning of it and how it shifts depending on the overall scale of each flower. So you can see how they're all a little bit different, and especially the side-facing ones are more oval, whereas the front-facing ones are going to be circular and they're going to be more centered within your larger circle. So from there, we can put in those lines. So I'm just following the middle of each petal and drawing those lines out and extending those lines basically to the edge of the larger circles. So here's what that looks like without the photo there, so you can get an idea of how that looks. You can take this as far as you would like to go. I just wanted to give you an idea if that part holds you up at all. There are ways to practice it and get comfortable with it, so then you can freehand it whenever you need to. So if the lines are all you need, that's totally fine, and you can just continue from there. If you want to add more in just as like an exercise or a learning process, then you can draw in each individual petal as well. So this is it with the photo. If we take the photo away, that's everything right here. And that's what it looks like. So as you're sketching yours out, if you want to use that as your template or your base, you can do that. If you want to pull those outer circles away, this is what this looks like. And now I'm kind of showing you what the basic outline of these flowers look like if you want to sketch them this way as well. So that initial circle, stamen, and then the lines help influence the final outcome, which you'll get a result like this once you begin painting everything. So keep that in mind. If you're struggling at any point in time, this works for basically any flower. It's just going to alter the shapes and where the stamens are positioned and maybe the shape of those stamens as well. But it's a really handy exercise if that part ever holds you up. So I just finished it up by drawing lines on the rest of them. I'm going to turn off the circle layer, but let's label both of these layers first before moving on. This top layer I'm going to label template, and then the layer right beneath it that we were using, I'm going to label circles. You can keep this circle layer. You could actually just delete it if you wanted to. I like having it there if I ever need to reference it for how large I need to make my florals. Next, we're going to grab the darkest blue color. It's the first one on the top row, and then switch to the thick, round, opaque brush. And this is all going to be painted on a brand new layer up at the top. So now we're just going to paint right on top of the template layer. We're going to use it as a template. We're going to follow that guide around and paint all of these petals in. And this brush has just a little bit of color variation programmed into it. So every time you paint a new stroke, the color is going to shift just slightly. And I did that on purpose because when you're painting florals, I designed this set to be intended to be used with florals and botanicals. And I love the shifts in color within nature as the sun is hitting those petals in different places. So this is a nice way to just integrate those changes in color without having to, go up to your color dot and change it just slightly every single time. So I'm just coming around, I'm following just the lines here. So I'm just making sure that I'm extending those petals as far as the line goes. And you can choose how wide or how skinny you would like to make these petals. And I like making these ones up at the top that are kind of facing off, making those ones smaller because you're not seeing quite as much of them. I want all the attention being focused right on the center floral, which is why that one is my largest. I want the viewer's eye to come from the outside directly to the center and then move around that centerpiece. So keep that in mind, your focal point, as you're sketching everything out. Once you start painting everything, scale also plays a really important role, as well as color and positioning. So now that we've got all of these petals painted in, I'm going to see what it looks like without the template. Just turn it off, see if everything's feeling comfortable. I like zooming out too to get an idea of how things look up close and far away. I'm noticing that I need to move a couple of these over just so it feels a little bit more balanced for me. So I'm just shifting that center one, which is really important because we're drawing a lot of attention to it, and that one right next to it. So that's feeling a lot more balanced to me. So now we can actually start painting in our stamens. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. I'm going to grab my darkest blue color, and I'm still using the same exact brush as before, the thick round opaque brush. And for these stamens, I just come around it and I scribble a circle. You could draw a circle, but for these ones, because the petals are so smooth around the edges, I wanted to introduce just a little bit of texture or variation. So that's why these ones are more of a scribble than a circle. So once you have all of your stamens complete, now we're going to add just a little bit of detail to our petals. So these details need to be underneath the stamen, but above the petals because we're painting on top of the petals. So create that brand new layer. We're going to grab the second blue color up on the top row, and we're going to switch our brush to the liner brush. And the liner brush is really helpful with creating fine lines that don't have a lot of texture or pressure variation. So I love this brush for these just really subtle lines. It doesn't look like much, but once you have a bunch of them in, it's a pretty dramatic final effect or final reveal when you zoom all the way out once you have all these lines put in. Whenever I have an opportunity to add a little bit more detail, especially to my largest florals, because that's where I want the viewer's attention to go, that's where I'll usually put these extra details. You don't have to put these extra details in every element you paint, but the largest ones, those are the most attention grabbing. So if you can make them a little bit nicer, then take advantage of that. Now that we have all of our details in, we're going to add some detail to the stamen. So we're just going to stipple a little bit. So I've got a brand new layer up at the very top, grabbing that kind of lavender color on the top row. Reduce your brush. I'm still using the liner brush, and it's pretty small. I think it's about 2%, and I'm just stippling in on top of all of these stamens. So I'm adding, once again, another layer of detail to these large florals that are the main focal point of my final piece. So once again, just keeping in mind, this is where we want people's attention to go. If we can make it look any more appealing, then we're going to take advantage of that. Once you have all of your stamen details put in here, we're going to group all of those layers together, and just to keep everything organized, rename this one Blue Flowers. And now we can move on to our secondary supporting floral. So create a brand new layer underneath that group. We're going to grab this kind of reddish pinkish color, and we're going to switch back to the thick round opaque brush because this brush has a lot of pressure. I'm about 6 to 8% here, and I'm scribbling in and laying down some circles. And I'm going to change up the scale on all of these because these ones are secondary, but they're still interesting. And they're very contrasting in color from our main blue florals. But you can see as I'm painting them that they're sitting behind the blue florals. So automatically the viewer can tell that they are secondary because of their positioning. And scale-wise, they're much smaller than our primary blue flowers. They're still going to call a lot of attention to themselves because of the color choice here. So we're really filling this out and supporting those blue florals. So your eye is going to go immediately to the center of our bouquet. And first the blue flowers, and then it's going to expand to the red flowers, which are going to support and lift up these blue florals. Once you have those, we need to put our stamens in. So I'm grabbing a pink color and painting on a layer right above our petal layer. So for these ones, really, really simple. We don't want to draw too much attention to them. We're already drawing enough attention with the color choice, and just drop in those stamens. I'm grouping those two layers together. and calling this one Pink Flowers. I'm going to create a brand new layer right underneath the pink flower group. And now we're going to start adding in a little bit of foliage. I'm grabbing the third color on the second row. I'm keeping my thick, round, opaque brush selected, increasing the size just slightly. And these ones are going to be that pointed oval shape, the most recognizable shape for a leaf. So these are really simple. We're not going to call too much attention to them because they are going to be very much a background element here. As you are creating your own bouquets or layouts or arrangements, just keep in mind when you are painting an element, how much attention do you want it to grab? Where is it positioned relative to the elements that you do want to call a lot of attention to? Here I know that this just needs to support it. I need some background elements behind my florals, so that's why these ones are really simple. So I'm labeling that layer dark green. I'm going to create a brand new layer right underneath the dark green layer, and now I'm going to show you a trick that I like to use with a lot of my bouquets. So what I do is grab a really dark color, I paint in a circle, it's pretty rough, and I make sure that this is going to be the furthest back element out of all of my layers. I'm going to add a Gaussian blur to it. I'm going to slide this up. I'm not going to go too far. I don't want the edge to get too soft. You can kind of see where the edge is getting soft here. And the point of this is to make it look like it's much more full than it actually is. So we've only drawn like 4 different types of elements here. We've got our blue flowers, pink flowers, the green leaves, and now we've got this background color fill layer. And this is kind of tricking the viewer into seeing more than what's actually there. Now it looks like this could be the top view of a bouquet that's really deep and full of different flowers. And we only have 4 different elements here. So it's a really, really easy trick to utilize to make things feel full without having to draw a zillion different elements. We're going to add in some more foliage, so I'm creating a brand new layer above the dark green layer. I'm grabbing the 4th color on the second row, and these ones are going to start getting just a little bit more interesting. We don't want to have just a bunch of plain, simple leaves everywhere. We do want some foliage elements that are going to be interesting, but still non-competitive. So these ones kind of have spiky edges. They're kind of similar to what you would see on a rose, a typical rose. So I'm going to paint these in. So these ones are a lighter color, so it means that they're closer to the top or closer to the viewer, and they are more interesting. And that's where all the interesting stuff is happening, is towards the top. So I'm coming around, I'm not putting as many of these in as our really simple green leaves because I don't want them to compete. And because we're going to add more detail on them, we don't want to call too much attention to them by having too many of them. The next thing we're going to do is create a brand new layer right above them. We're going to switch to that last green color on the second row and then switch to the liner brush because we're going to add in some details. This is a pretty small size, about 3%. And all I'm going to do is draw a line up and then a bunch of V's heading down that line. So that's just showing the viewer really quickly that this leaf has some really obvious veining to it. So we're going to put this veining on all of this style of leaf and come around our bouquet and add that in. Okay, once we have that all complete, we're just going to take a look at things, how everything's feeling balanced. If you need to tweak anything at this point, add in any extra elements, remove extra elements, now's the time to do that. So now I want to add some elements, some foliage elements to the very top. So I want to overlap some of these blue flowers. So I'm creating a brand new layer up at the very top. I'm grabbing this lime green color so it'll stand out on top of the blue flowers. And this will just add another dimension to this entire piece. It's important to recognize when you want things to overlap, what types of elements you want to overlap other elements. So I'm keeping this really simple. I don't want these to compete with the blue flowers, but I want to show that this bouquet has a lot of different elements and they're poking out all over the place. They're not just stacked one on top of the other. So this will give volume to it by still being a flat style. So for these ones, really, really simple rounded leaves, and I'm just coming around at the tips of all of these stems. These stems generally have 2 on each one. I don't think I've done more than that anywhere, but obviously feel free to expand on that, draw as many or as few as you would like. So now I'm looking at it and I'm seeing that I could put some poking out of the outside. I don't have to just keep these specific to the inside of this bouquet. So I'm not going overboard here. I have a few of them and I'm making sure that they're overlapping some of those blue flowers. I'm going to create a brand new layer, apply a clipping mask to it, and grab that 4th color on the 2nd row, grab your liner brush, and this is going to be a really, really simple detail. It's just one line through, so super, super easy here. This is totally optional. If you would rather leave it plain, you could do that. I felt like I had a lot of detail going on for my top elements and I wanted to carry that through, but I didn't want to go overboard with it. So that's why I just have that simple line through there, and that's a really easy way to add detail quickly. Now we're going to add another foliage element, but we're going to put it on top of the pink flowers, but behind everything else. So once again, keeping in mind the sense of volume that we want to create by adding different layers with different elements. So for these ones, they're just going to come out, and this is kind of like a tan color. This one is branching off. The stem isn't just a plain, simple stem like our green elements. This one's kind of mimicking a branch, but we're going to keep it really, really simple, and we're going to change up the leaf style on all of these too. So I'm just coming around. I'm also paying attention to where this little fade is appearing from that background fill layer, and I'm trying my best to eliminate any visible parts of that soft edge. So keeping that in mind, still drawing all of these branches all the way around. I have quite a few more of these branches than I do the green elements. These ones are basically going around my arrangement rather than being inside my arrangement as well as around it. So that's why I felt comfortable creating more than with my green elements. So the leaves on these ones, this brush is really fun for creating leaves, but it does take a little bit of practice. Start with very, very little pressure, go to probably medium pressure, and then go back to low pressure and slowly lift up your stylus as you're doing that. So you can see right here, I'm going much slower than I usually draw. Go slow, little pressure, medium pressure, little pressure, and then lift up. So if you lift up too soon, you're going to get more of a curved end. And if you want a really pointy end, you want to hold that stylus on the screen a little bit longer before lifting up. So it's a very, very soft transition from your stylus being on screen to off screen. It's nice to practice these. You can just create a brand new canvas and just draw a bunch of leaves. It can be pretty therapeutic to do that too. So this is one of my favorite types of leaves because they're so quick and easy to draw and they look great. And I'm just changing up the scale. You can make some fatter, some skinnier, longer, shorter. You can still alter this and make it your own however you would like. There's a lot of freedom here. You don't have to make everything exactly the same. So we're going to create a brand new layer right above the layer we just painted on, and we're going to add some textures. So I'm grabbing my darkest brown color and my dried out brush. There is a clipping mask applied to this layer. This size is, I believe, around 13%, but make it any size you'd like that you're comfortable with the scale of your leaves. So I'm just scribbling in here. There's nothing fancy about this. This brush has a lot of pressure variation that's randomized, so you're going to get a different look with every stroke that you paint. And I love that about this brush because you can really make things feel very original with that texture. So whenever I need to introduce a little bit of texture, that is my go-to brush. So that completes our freestyle gouache floral arrangement entirely in Procreate. Once again, that color palette is available for free. I'll leave a link on screen to my Gouache Lovers brush set, but please feel free to use any brushes that you'd like. Once again, my name is Teela. I release a brand new Procreate tutorial every every single Tuesday all year long. You can find me over at every-tuesday.com. My YouTube channel is where I release my tutorials. You can find me over on YouTube at youtube.com/everytuesday, and on Instagram you can find me at everytuesday. Whenever you complete any of my projects, I ask that you use the hashtag Procreate it. I follow that hashtag and I try and like and comment on everything, and I just love seeing the artwork that's created from my different tutorials. So I would love to see what you make. Thank you so much for participating in my workshop during the summer workshop retreat. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week checking out brand new workshops, and hopefully I will see you soon.